Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Transportation Committee. We have a full schedule this morning. I'm going to, before I get to the agenda, I'm going to move over to the mic, and we have some awards to hand out this morning, so we'll start off with that, and then we'll come back to the more formal agenda. Good morning, everyone. May is Bike to Work Month, a time of year when the city promotes cycling as a fun and healthy part of the daily commute to and from work. It's an appropriate time to also honor others who help us achieve the goals that we set out in the 2013 Transportation Master Plan of increasing the cycling modal share from 3% to 5% of the morning peak period trips, and to have cycling account for 8% of all trips in the downtown. Every year, we recognize the efforts of others for their outstanding contributions in Ottawa's cycling community through the Bruce Timmermans Awards. Bruce Timmermans was a longtime cycling educator and advocate, an active member of the Ottawa Bicycle Club, and a founding member of Citizens for Safe Cycling. We honor his legacy every year through the awards we are presenting here today. This morning, we are presenting one individual and one organizational award. I will invite the recipients to come forward shortly to receive their awards. The individual award goes to Mr. Gareth Davies. Gareth came to Ottawa from Toronto, God bless you, and brought with him a level of energy and enthusiasm that can only be described as all-Canadian. He loves his newly adopted city and as much as his country, and he shows it in everything that he does. Gareth is a community builder. Taking on the role of President of Citizens for Safe Cycling in 2015, he has made advocacy something that is not only positive, but a truly pleasant experience. He works on bringing people together to collaborate on strengths and make cycling better for all. Gareth keeps the conversation positive, thank you for that. He looks at potential solutions and builds bridges between partners to ensure many voices are heard before a recommendation is made. Whether you are a leisure rider who needs a safer route to the library, or a commuter who needs respect as a vehicle on the road, Gareth will listen, smile, and help. He is truly passionate about cycling and works tirelessly on promoting cycling, advocating for a safe and efficient bike infrastructure, and has become the voice of cyclists in Ottawa. Gareth is a strong supporter of Causeway, Safer Roads Ottawa, Enviro Centre, the Parkdale Food Centre, and many other community and nonprofit groups in Ottawa. He is truly an outstanding citizen, not just for his bike advocacy work, but in making Ottawa a more sustainable, vibrant place to live. We were all lucky when he decided to make Ottawa his home. Gareth, please come forward to receive your well-deserved award. I'd also like to invite Councillor Mark Taylor, Gareth's ward councillor, to join me for the presentation. So don't leave the room, Gareth, because we're going to do a group shot after with the other award winner. This year, the organization award goes to Ottawa Safety Council. Founded in 1957, the Ottawa Safety Council is a nonprofit organization that advocates for and delivers high-quality risk reduction and injury prevention programs in our community. In 2016, the Ottawa Safety Council's Bike Rodeo program provided more than 2,000 young cyclists across Ottawa with the chance to learn safe riding skills and rules of the road. Through fun activities and demonstrations, the rodeos help children from JK to grade 4 learn about various elements of safe and responsible bicycling, including proper helmet fitting, maintenance, rules of the road and traffic signs, hand signals, shoulder checks, balance, and weaving and maneuvering. The rodeos are offered at no charge to participants, and most are delivered in a school setting in conjunction with bike-to-school events. For that reason, the program is also a key component of broader efforts to increase rates of active school travel in Ottawa. Children who learn to cycle and to cycle safely are more likely to be a commuter or recreational cyclists as adults. Since 1996, more than 40,000 Ottawa children have benefited from this program. In addition to the bike rodeo program, the Ottawa Safety Council also supports children's mobility through its adult crossing guard, walking school bus, and pedestrian safety presentation programs. I'd like to invite two representatives from the Ottawa Safety Council, Julie Vogt, CEO, and Corrine Rickelman, Program Manager, to come forward and accept the award. If you could please stay up. We're going to ask Councillor Taylor and Gareth to come up, and we'll just have a group shot of all the recipients. Again, thank you very much. And we'll now move on to the more substantive portion of the agenda. So we have quorum in the room. We've received no regrets, no declarations of interest. Confirmation of the minutes of April 5th, 2017, carried. Thank you. The first item is applying the complete street lens to projects in 2016 and 2017. The recommendation is that the Transportation Committee receive this report for information. Can we carry this? See, thank you. Number 2 is the Elgin Street and Hawthorne Avenue Functional Design Study. We have both a presentation and some delegations, so we will hold that. Number 3 on our agenda is the Vanguard Drive Extension, Launche Drive to Mare Bleu Road, Environmental Assessment Study Statement of Work. The recommendation is that the Transportation Committee approve the Statement of Work for the Vanguard Drive Extension, Launche Drive to Mare Bleu Road, Environmental Assessment Study as detailed in document number 1. Carried? Okay, thank you. So we will go back to the Elgin Street presentation. And I'm going to invite Vivi Chi and her team up to lead the presentation. I want to thank Ms. Chi and her team. There was a lot of public consultation involved in this process, a lot of discussion, a lot of suggestion from the residents, the businesses in the area, councillors on the committee, councillors at large, and I believe that what's in front of us today incorporates much of those discussions and shows that the city has heard the concerns raised by a number of different groups, a number of different stakeholders. We had a stakeholders group that we work with as well, and I want to thank them for the work that they've done. And I'm going to turn it over to Vivi and her team to lead the presentation, and then we'll move into delegations. And again, if any of the committee members have questions, for staff, if they could hold them until after the delegations. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Beside me is Colin Simpson, who's the Program Manager of the Transportation Engineering Services branch in my area. And next to him is Ron Clark, our Consultant Lead from Parsons. Also in the audience, we have the rest of the Parsons team, but I want to point out that Vanessa Black is our City Project Manager on this file. She's in the audience as well. Has been a very complex project, and we're very pleased today to present to you a plan that balances all the needs of the users in the corridor. This project, this recommended plan, also addresses all of Council's policies and approved design standards. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Simpson to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi. Elgin Street and Hawthorne Avenue are in need of underground infrastructure renewal, and the existing water main and sewers in this location are more than 100 years old. And there have been 7 water main breaks along this corridor since 2010. Heavy construction for these renewal works is planned to begin in 2019, and that provides the opportunity to consider improvements to the surface configuration of these streets, which is the focus of the staff recommendations and staff report before you today. The recommended plan, as Vivi mentioned, fulfills all provincial and municipal accessibility requirements. It is consistent with council-approved policy directions with respect to traditional main streets, design priority areas, complete streets, and the arterial road network. And in general, the recommended plan is to enhance the public space through a coordinated landscaping and street furnishing plan in a way that benefits business frontages while providing appropriate parking and loading opportunities for the street to operate safely and efficiently. Recent similar renewal projects include Wellington Street West, which was reconstructed in 2010 for water main and sewer work. And this photo shows how the street looks today, just west of Hawthorne Avenue. The sidewalks were widened and coordinated with an integrated furnishing and landscaping plan, which also included public art. Preston Street was reconstructed in 2010 for water main and sewer renewal. This photo is Preston Street today, just south of the Queensway, and it highlights the new wide sidewalks, patio areas, street trees, and other amenities that were integrated into that project. Somerset Street was renewed in 2011 west of Booth, including the bridge over the O-Train Trillium line. That project included widening the sidewalks and enhancing the public space, including delineating on-street parking with unit pavers to narrow the vehicle travel portion of the road. And Rideau Street, between Dalhousie Street and Sussex Drive, is currently under construction for water and sewer renewal work in coordination with the new Rideau Street LRT station and the Rideau Centre Mall expansion. And this rendering shows the new approved surface configuration of the street, which includes wider sidewalks along with flex spaces that can be used for on-street parking or patios or other programmable activities. You know, in summary, all of these street renewal examples, including others such as Main Street and Queen Street. These are all examples of 4-lane arterial roads that have been reduced to 2 lanes with on-street parking to enhance the public space. And all of these examples are applicable and transferable to the Elgin Street and Hawthorne contexts. The general study area for this project includes Elgin Street south of Laurier Avenue to Pretoria Bridge, and Hawthorne Avenue west of Main Street. It also includes one short block of Waverley Street between Elgin Street and Jack Purcell Park. The reconstruction limits for the upcoming renewal project is slightly smaller than our project area, shown here by the dashed line that extends south of Lisgar Street to Isabella Street, including the Waverley Street and Hawthorne Avenue sections. This photo shows Elgin Street today as a 4-lane road with on-street parking permitted off-peak times only. The sidewalks, including the clear width space, is very narrow to maneuver. In many locations, there's just enough space for one pedestrian in each direction to pass each other, resulting in pedestrians frequently walking in the road. Hydro poles are currently in the middle of the sidewalk on the west side of Elgin Street in several locations. Hydro burial has not been incorporated into the recommended plan because there's currently no third-party funding source, which is required as per the City of Ottawa's undergrounding policy. And the recommended plan includes slightly relocating the hydro poles further away from the building face towards the new proposed curb line. And that work, along with other utility relocations, will likely need to occur in 2018 in advance of the heavy construction. This photo again illustrates how people walk in the vehicle curb lane along Elgin Street because of the narrow sidewalks. And this photo was taken during off-peak times when parking is permitted just north of Somerset Street. And it's at this location where there's typically about 800 pedestrians per hour during peak times. So it can be a very busy place for people on foot. Elgin Street today includes a typical east side configuration of 2 motor vehicle travel lanes that both vary in widths of approximately 3 to 3.3 meters, which is substandard in terms of the Transportation Association of Canada's recommended width of 3.5 meters. Note that the width of an OC Transpo bus from mirror to mirror is 3.3 meters, and so buses and other heavy vehicles typically encroach into the adjacent lanes. The sidewalk clear width space also varies between 1.4 and 1.8 meters, and there are approximately 24 locations along Elgin Street where the existing clear width space is below the 1.8 City of Ottawa accessibility design standard. The narrowest existing sidewalk clear width is 1.1 meters, and that's on the west side of Elgin Street, just south of Gladstone, adjacent to an existing hydro pole. The consultation process included the formation of a diverse working group of stakeholders that comprised of mainly community and business leaders as well as city staff. There were 4 formal working group meetings through the course of study in addition to 2 public open houses that were well attended. The first open house in June of 2016 was a large workshop format that helped scope the direction of the project, while the second public open house in January of 2017 focused on the recommended design. A project webpage was also established to disseminate and receive information, including an online questionnaire that generated more than 1,000 responses, and the recommended plan was also presented to the Urban Design Review Panel, as well as the Accessibility Advisory Committee. There were also additional stakeholder meetings as well. You know, the major themes that we heard through the consultation process included a desire by many to widen the sidewalks along Elgin Street, to improve the cycling environment, to bury hydro wires, and to have a coordinated street furnishing and landscaping plan with more street trees and less clutter along the street. Businesses were also concerned about the impacts associated with the construction activities, including the duration of the construction, as well as temporary and permanent parking reductions. The consultation feedback helped to form the general planning framework that guided the recommended plan, which included the following key points: to enhance public space through widening sidewalks and providing amenities, through including attention to business frontage space, on-street parking, and loading opportunities, to improve cycling conditions through lowering vehicle operating speeds, given that there is insufficient right-of-way to provide bike lanes, to ensure continuity of the arterial road network by confirming that the new design can accommodate motor vehicle demands, to expedite construction and minimize traffic disruptions to the greatest extent possible, and to provide parking opportunities during construction. This is a rendering of the recommended plan for Elgin Street between Lisgar Street and Argyle Avenue. It includes 2 vehicle travel lanes for this 9-block segment, along with turning lanes at most of the signalized intersections. South of Argyle Avenue, a 4-lane cross-section is recommended to match into the existing road configuration. The traffic analysis, which is appended to the staff report as document 4, shows that the recommended design will accommodate motor vehicle demand without diverting traffic onto other streets. However, travel times will likely increase by 1 to 1.5 minutes in the peak directions during peak times, and this represents about a 25 to 35% increase in motor vehicle travel times along this section of Elgin Street. The sidewalks are recommended to be widened with pedestrian clear zones of at least 2 meters, and approximately 90 flex spaces for on-street parking or for patio areas have been integrated into the recommended design. There are several traffic calming features, such as 4 raised intersections at the Lisgar, Somerset, Gilmore, and Gladstone intersections, and this will assist in reducing vehicle speeds and will increase the safety and comfort for cycling in the recommended shared vehicle lane. The recommended design is fairly symmetrical for both sides of Elgin Street. Shown here is the typical east side, which includes a 3.5 meter wide shared vehicle lane adjacent to a 2.5 meter wide flex space that can be used for parking or patio space. And this flex space would be at the same height as the sidewalk, similar to what has been recently constructed just a few blocks away on Queen Street. The sidewalk itself would be widened, and there will be space for landscaping amenities, as previously noted. On-street parking was a significant consultation theme for this project. There are currently 122 on-street parking spaces on Elgin Street between Laurier Avenue and Catherine Street. Our recommended plan reduces that to 90 spaces, with 83 being programmable flex spaces directly on Elgin Street, with 7 additional spaces on adjacent street corners. All of the remaining 90 on-street parking spaces would be available at all times of the day, rather than just during off-peak times, which is the current existing situation. And there are several examples of flex spaces here in Ottawa and elsewhere in Ontario. Queen Street, Rideau Street, and Lansdowne Park are good Ottawa examples, as well as King Street in Kitchener. In terms of street metrics, the Elgin Street recommended plan, for the recommended plan, the public amenity space and sidewalk areas would increase by 43%. Crossing distances for pedestrians would be reduced between 14 and 21%. And the landscaping plan includes significantly more trees as well as additional bus shelters. Waverly Street between Elgin Street and Jack Purcell Park is also included in this renewal plan. Waverly Street today consists of 1 eastbound vehicle travel lane with 8 off-peak parking spaces, and this is where the sewer connections are expected to be the deepest. The recommended plan for Waverly includes 6 flex parking spaces, tree plantings, and seating opportunities to enhance the public realm. This is to improve linkages between Elgin Street and Jack Purcell Park, and is to create a new public space for the neighborhood while continuing to maintain vehicle mobility, circulation, and parking. Hawthorne Avenue today, west of Main Street, is a 4-lane road with 1.5 meter sidewalks. It currently has 28 on-street parking spaces that are available during off-peak times only, and it is also designated as a traditional main street with a mix of residential and business uses, including a small linear park on the north side. The recommended plan for Hawthorne Avenue includes a 3-lane cross-section with 2 eastbound vehicle lanes and 1 westbound lane. 14 on-street parking spaces would be retained on the south side for use during off-peak times. The south side curb lane would continue to be used as a travel lane during peak times, and it would be more than 4 meters wide to accommodate side-by-side shared use with cyclists. The sidewalks are recommended to be 3 meters wide on the south side and 2 meters wide on the north side of the street, and a westbound buffered bike lane is also recommended. The next steps for this project, upon approval by City Council, would be to initiate the detailed design phase for the functional plan that is described in the staff report. That work will also include the development of a construction phasing plan, a communications plan, and a traffic management plan, which will highlight the required traffic detours and parking opportunities associated with the construction phase. And city staff will continue to consult with the working group members, businesses, and community stakeholders through these next steps and beyond. And that concludes the formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I said at the very beginning, there's been a lot of consultation on this project. There's been a lot of discussion, and as a result, there are a number of motions and a direction that have come out of those discussions and consultations. So what I'm going to ask the various members of council or committee to do is to introduce their motions. So before we go to the public delegations and before we go to questions to staff, everybody's on the same page. I will point out that, and I'm quoting part of the interview, but last night one of the business owners along Elgin Street was interviewed on CTV and said, but yeah, the 1 year is a home run. So I see that as a very positive statement from the business groups, and we're going to hear a little bit more, I think, from the business groups here this morning. And they were one of the key stakeholders, of course, along with the residents. So I'm going to ask Councillor Manette, first of all. He has a motion related to parking over the construction period.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion is pretty well self-explanatory. Whereas on-street parking along Elgin Street will be temporarily removed during reconstruction of the street, and whereas Elgin Street business owners have indicated that their customers who come from across the city will need access to nearby parking during construction, therefore be it resolved that staff work to provide opportunities for additional temporary parking within close vicinity of Elgin Street during reconstruction. To the General Manager of Public Works and Environment Services be delegated the authority during the time that Elgin is under reconstruction to designate dates and times when parking at City Hall will be free of charge. And 3, staff work with the business owners on Elgin Street during the reconstruction period to coordinate advertising of the opportunities for temporary and for free public parking.
Thank you. The next motion is a motion by Councillor Fleury dealing with the 90 flex spots on the street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a technical motion that I'm moving on behalf of the Chair here. Whereas the Elgin Street redesign incorporates flexible space that can be used in different function, whereas the number of parking spaces have been reduced to the street redesign, therefore be resolved that the 90 flexible parking spaces be designed for the purpose of parking and patio use only.
Thank you. The next motion is a motion by the Vice Chair and one of the ward councillors involved in this design process. So I'm going to ask Vice Chair to introduce her motion on patio bylaw exemption for 2018.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas the new right-of-way patio program and evaluation of street side spots pilot program was adopted by City Council on March 8, 2017, and whereas same requires patios to comply with the accessibility design standards, including a minimum pedestrian clearway width of 2.0 meters on sidewalks abutting patios, and whereas Council deferred the requirement for existing patios to comply with the accessibility design standards and pedestrian clearway until April 1st, 2018, and whereas following reconstruction, Elgin Street, including existing patios, will comply with the accessibility design standards, including the pedestrian clearway. Therefore, be it resolved that applications for the renewal of permits administered through the right-of-way patio bylaw on Elgin Street are subject to the provisions of the new right-of-way patio bylaw, except for the requirements regarding the accessibility design standards and pedestrian clearway, which such requirements are deferred until the reconstruction of the pedestrian elements of the project adjacent to the existing patios are complete.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And finally, the Vice Chair has a direction to staff regarding the construction process itself. Oh, hang on. We also do have one more motion, but we'll stay with the Vice Chair, and then we'll move to Councillor Moffat, who's moving the motion on behalf of Councillor Harder, who doesn't sit on the committee. So if we could have the direction first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In relation to the implementation of the reconstruction of Elgin Street, that staff be directed to complete the heavy construction related to the replacement of underground infrastructure in a 12-month period, i.e. first lift of asphalt and road in service. The second year of construction, to have the road in service with parking available, although sections will be affected by rotating construction activities in the corridor. Staff, in consultation with the Elgin Area Business Association, EABA, to take all reasonable steps to mitigate the impact of such activities. Sidewalks to be maintained in operation throughout the whole project with a temporary surface meeting accessibility requirements, although sections will be affected by rotating construction activities in the corridor. During detailed design, staff to work with the EABA, other local stakeholders, and local residents to see whether there are periods of time, for example, the Ottawa Race Weekend, Army Run, when we need to ask the contractor to pause construction in portions of the corridor so that it is not disruptive to the events, even though the corridor will remain closed. During construction, staff to work to keep some cross streets open, although sections will be affected by rotating construction activities in the corridor. During detailed design, staff will consult with the EABA, other local stakeholders, and residents on the detour plans to mitigate impacts. Establish working groups with the EABA, other local stakeholders, for example, the Elgin Street Parent Council, and residents to ensure open communication through the design and construction period, similar to the approach used for the Bank Street Reconstruction project. Work with the local councillor, the EABA, other local stakeholders and residents on proactive communication with the community on construction activity, timing, and progress. And finally, work with the local councillor, the EABA, other local stakeholders and residents on communicating open for business through city and the councillor's social media tools and site signage.
Thank you very much. Does staff accept that direction?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. And finally, we have a motion that Councillor Moffat will be moving.
Thank you. This is something I've worked on with Councillor Harder and a number of other councillors as well, including Councillor Taylor, Councillor Blais, just regarding the construction period and getting in and out of the core, as there's a number of projects going on at the same time. So whereas Elgin Street is an important transportation, residential, and commercial hub in the downtown core, and this significant reconstruction activity will have a major temporary impact on those who use Elgin Street corridor as part of their daily transportation route, whether they walk, cycle, drive, or take public transit. And whereas a number of other major construction projects are planned in the downtown core over the course of the same construction period, including the Metcalfe Street and King Edward Avenue road resurfacings, the Laurier Avenue East cycling lanes, the Kent Street combined sewer storage tunnel, and Catherine Street and Bronson Avenue renewal and resurfacing, and whereas a comprehensive traffic management plan in concert with a detailed communications plan was developed and implemented successfully for the Ottawa on the Move to ensure that disruption to local and flow-through traffic was minimized during the lengthy construction period, whereas members of council want to ensure that the mitigation strategies related to Elgin Street and Hawthorne Avenue reconstruction incorporate a broad understanding of construction in the area, the full range of traffic management tools that could be employed to assist with pedestrian, cycling, vehicle, and public transit movement during construction, as well as the multimodal impacts of each initiative, and an appreciation that some may need to be changed quickly if they are not working as intended. And whereas communications will be key to the success of a traffic management plan for this project, and members of council all have residents that will be affected for the duration of this construction period, therefore be it resolved, the Transportation Committee recommend that City Council direct staff to develop a comprehensive traffic management plan for the Elgin Street and Hawthorne Avenue reconstruction project, as well as a detailed communications plan as described in this motion and in consultation with members of council.
Thank you, Councillor. So as I indicated at the beginning, a great deal of work has gone on over the last number of weeks with a variety of stakeholders, committee members, council members, and this direction and the various motions reflect that work. And again, I want to thank everybody who participated in those discussions and provided input. And before we move to the delegations, I also want to confirm that the various motions that have been put forward this morning, Ms. Chi, they're all staff supported, are they?
Yes, they are, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. So our first delegation is Nancy Biggs from ESAC. And Nancy will be followed by Peter Abraham from Sir John A's Pub. Good morning, Nancy. How are you?
Good morning. I did have a slideshow, but...
we're working on it. It's coming.
Okay.
And we won't start the clock until we fix it, so don't worry about that.
Okay. Good morning. The Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee would like to thank City staff for the Elgin Street and Hawthorne Avenue functional design study. Elgin Street has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become an amazing main street, a destination street, and not just a thoroughfare for commuter traffic. Hans Moore, former president of Citizens for Safe Cycling, in his Urban Blogger website said destination streets should be complete streets and serve all kinds of traffic, particularly pedestrians, who should be able to walk around freely without having to be afraid for their lives. Unfortunately, this morning, walking up Elgin Street, I noticed lots of police cars, and I believe a pedestrian might have been hit. So it's not safe at the moment. Widening the sidewalks, planting trees, and lowering the speed limit to 30 kilometers per hour will make it much more pleasant for people to walk, shop, and enjoy the cafes, restaurants, and bars. Could Elgin Street become a street like the one posted in Hans' photo? Janet Sadiq Khan, former New York City Transportation Commissioner, documented the impacts of changes in street design on surrounding locally owned retail businesses and measured the effects of street projects in her report, The Economic Benefits of Sustainable Streets. Surveys performed in different cities across North America have typically focused on dense urban retail areas, with results demonstrating that a large proportion of visitors, possibly much more than some business owners might think, arrive on foot, by bike, or by public transit, with a minority arriving by car or taxi. They have also found that people who arrive on foot or by bike generally visit the area more often than those who use other methods of transportation, and cumulatively spend more per capita at local businesses. Shoppers often indicate that they would visit more often if additional enhancements were made to the street environment, such as reducing the volume of traffic or calming traffic speeds, expanding space for pedestrians, or adding bicycling infrastructure. Numerous North American streets were transformed from unwelcoming, traffic-dominated corridors, which seems to be Elgin Street now, to safer, more attractive public spaces that better accommodate all users. Arterials have been transformed into complete streets. Creating a more comfortable and enjoyable public realm could potentially result in people patronizing local businesses more than they otherwise would. Experience has shown that in many instances, business owners are apprehensive of changes to streets that are perceived to benefit pedestrians and cyclists while reducing convenience for drivers, based on the belief that providing easy access for motorists into their business district, along with ample nearby parking, is critical to their store's success. Results from surveys of shoppers in urban shopping districts suggest that this fear is in large part unfounded. Similarly, multiple surveys conducted in dense urban shopping areas indicate that after these types of changes are implemented, businesses see improved performance, and they often become vocal supporters of further enhancements to the public realm. ESAC agrees with Councillor Chernyshenko that reducing the number of parking spaces would serve to attract more visitors, and that the prioritizing of on-street parking over all other uses and users has been discredited when it comes to business success. ESAC also agrees with the Councillor that the proposed 90 parking spaces will reduce the ability of making Elgin Street a complete street. But looking at the study this morning, having the flex parking might sort of help that. And so that it might have been that with fewer parking spaces, it might be more of a complete street. While we're at it, why don't we close Elgin to traffic during the playoffs and has the Send Smile back? Thank you.
That sounds like a motion for Councillor Moffat. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the delegation? Thank you. As I said, next is Peter Abraham from Sir John A. Pub, and he will be followed by Brian Karam on behalf of EABA. Good morning. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
And Sir John A. Pub on Elgin, also part owner of the building with family members. Following a number of consultations with the Elgin Redesign Working Group, made up of business owners and residents, city staff have put forward a design that I'm excited about. Wider sidewalks, trees, opportunity for patios. I'm totally on board. I believe that if we have an open mind, everybody wins in this, and in my opinion, we'll all be successful. A lot of my business is based on the residents, and the feedback that I got was unanimous, and I'm excited. I want to thank the city staff also. In working in these group meetings, they were amazing, and I truly say that. They were open-minded. A shout out to Ron Clark and Parsons. I mean, I must have called him numerous times about so much detail, but he was always there, and I really appreciated that. Our voice was heard. Thanks to the efforts of Chair Egley and Councillor McKinney, discussions with members of the business community led to a commitment from the city to limit the heavy construction to 1 year, and that's a big hurdle, and that's a big step for everybody. And I shared that with my staff and people on the street, and it's great for everybody. It takes the pressure off. When I've had employees for 15 and 17 years, it's still going to be a challenge, but I know we can get through it, and that's an exciting moment. So thanks again. With this construction schedule on the table, I am pleased to support the proposed design on Elgin Street, and it's been a long process, but I'm excited, and we've got a good mixed use. We have parking, we have wider sidewalks that I totally support, and it'll enable the patios to prosper, and not just for me. I'm happy to see the other patios, because one thing we have to remember, we're all in this together, and if it's just me doing well or a few others, it doesn't bring people to the street. So I'm all for as many patios, but obviously having the proper clearway. So again, thank you, and that's all I have to say. Any questions?
Yeah, don't leave yet. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, no, thank you very much. Okay. And next, and our final speaker this morning is Brian Karam on behalf of the EABA. Morning, Brian.
Morning.
I know you've been here before, so you know the rules.
Know the rules. Well, as many of you know, I operate McLaren's on Elgin and the Business Inn. I also have my law practice in that property, and I own the property. And I've been there since the early 1980s. And I'm also president of the Elgin Area Business Association, which involves the property owners and the businesses on Elgin.
Brian, sorry to interrupt, but I'm getting a nod from Ms. Chianello that she can't hear you, so could you speak a bit more into the mic?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, essentially, I'm here to say that we're happy with this compromise. Passions have been high on both sides of all issues. Basically, we live Elgin Street 24/7. I like to say that debate is an exchange of intelligence and argument is an exchange of ignorance, and we kept the discussion to debate throughout. We now have to get down to the detail and the implementation, and hopefully that will proceed as well over the next 2 to 3 years. I want to thank the committee members, in fact all councillors and all staff, for working positively on this, regardless of what side of the issue they were on. And similarly, I want to thank the property owners and businesses on Elgin Street who did the same, spent a lot of time on this, which indicates their commitment and level of interest. In particular, I think I have to mention Chair Aglai's efforts and the efforts of Mr. Willis and Mr. Manconi and the local councillor. So thank you. I hope that we all continue to proceed forward positively and in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions for the delegation? Oh, Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thanks for coming out, Brian, and I think everyone knows you're kind of like the godfather of Elgin Street. There's no BIA there. I think some of the questions I have are pretty simple. A couple of months ago, a lot of the bar owners and restaurants were like a hornet's nest. They were very upset with the initial proposal by the city, and it seems like we've had a multitude of motions come forward today, directions to staff. Can you highlight, even as late as last week, I spoke to some bar owners that were still concerned. It seems like it's all kind of changed in the last 48 hours. Can you explain to me what...
I wouldn't say in the last 48 hours. The primary issue has always been the time of construction. And that's a very difficult issue to address because it's not so much the businesses on Elgin Street as the mix of businesses on Elgin Street. So then let me be specific. I'll give you one or two examples. One is the pharmacy. It's the oldest independent pharmacy. This is White Cross Pharmacy in the city. It's been there since 1984, and the family that owns the pharmacy also owns the walk-in clinic next door, also owns the property. No question, if those customers go to another establishment for 3 years or 2 years, it's very unlikely that they're going to come back. Realistically, the underground services have to be repaired and renewed, and there's going to be pain. The issue is, can we minimize that pain and save the businesses? The one-year suggestion was a suggestion from the pharmacy. They feel they can get by with 1 year. They can salvage their business and their employees with 1 year. So the 1 year, I guess, was a watershed moment in terms of positive discussion. And it will allow us, in many cases, to not only save the business, but in particular save the mix of businesses that makes a difference on that street. One of the speakers earlier talked about North America, what's happening in North America. It's in the staff report. Our belief is what's happening in North America, or even in places like St. Catherine Street in Montreal or Yonge Street in Toronto, bear no relationship to what happens on Elgin Street in Ottawa. They are truly local businesses that have been there for generations. Interesting statistic, from Barrister House to Catherine Street, the only piece of property that's institutionally owned is the Toronto Dominion Bank at Somerset Street. Every other property is owned by a local family and has been owned for anywhere from 2 to 5 generations. So it's a unique situation where families are concerned about the continuity of the business, the continuity of their employees, and a key element has been the length of time that construction will take place.
Very, very well articulated, thank you. And your email actually yesterday, I think, really highlighted a lot of that. So in your mind, from, I believe it was 15 businesses that you're representing? Was it 15 businesses?
No, we're representing all but 15 businesses.
All but 15 businesses.
So those other, the 15 businesses, we didn't get responses from. And we didn't get responses from 5 properties. So we're also representing all but 5 properties.
It's impressive. So if you were to sum it up, it is the construction time schedule was the major concern for businesses.
Major concern.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's one other question for you, Brian, from Councillor Caudry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And actually, my question was asked by Councillor Tierney, so I'm okay with the response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So those are all the delegations. I'll now put together a list of committee members that wish to speak to the matter. Question okay. So Councillor Deans.
Just want to...
I just want to finish the list first, Councillor, before I... Sorry. Councillor Sheko, Fleury, Tierney, Caudry, You'll be fine, okay. Okay, Councillor Deans, thank you.
Just want to understand what the Pretoria Bridge, the changes on the Pretoria Bridge are going to look like, because you talked about Elgin and Hawthorne, and I know, because that's actually my route, I use the Pretoria Bridge. Right now there's 4 lanes on that bridge. Will there continue to be 4 lanes on the bridge?
Chair, there is no change to Pretoria Bridge. It'll stay as is.
Okay, perfect. Because that concerned me, because I find that bridge challenging at the best of times because of the cycling lane there, and I always feel that it's difficult. So I'm happy to hear that. This has been an interesting file for me because, I've gone to a lot of conferences on new urbanism and complete streets, and I really believe the principles in all of that animating the street will be a net benefit to the street and to the city, and I really believe that you have to animate the core of a city, and Elgin Street is important to the core of our city. So I think what you're recommending is supportable and a really good idea. I'm also a South End councillor, and I'm concerned about the loss of automobile capacity in the north-south direction. And, I just think over the last few years where we have seen Main Street be shrunk, and now we'll see Elgin Street be shrunk, and even Bronson to a certain extent. And, in our planning documents, we talk about, for example, an Alta Vista corridor, but I just have the impression that that's a pipe dream, that that's never really going to happen. And what we're really doing is losing commuter north-south capacity, and I don't know how much we've lost, but my sense is it's adding up to something significant. So I guess my question is just, how do you address the capacity issue for north-south commuters while you continue to remove automobile capacity in that direction?
Mr. Chair, for Elgin Street itself, we did undertake the traffic analysis, and there will be capacity. There's still capacity for it to function as an arterial road. Travel times will be increased by a little bit, as Mr. Simpson had mentioned, 1 to 1.5 minutes in the peak direction, peak period. We also are very cognizant of the other projects that we're doing through the downtown, such as O'Connor. We've added the bikeways, Rideau Street, all those projects, even Laurier at the very beginning when we started our segregated bike lanes project there. And so my strategic planning team had a look at the capacity of the downtown. And actually, it's also, we've looked at data from decades ago and in the future, looking into the forecast as well and comparing it to other cities. For the city of Ottawa, the trend has been that there are fewer cars coming into the downtown. However, the number of trips continue to increase, which shows that our downtown is very successful and growing. So it's the travel modes have changed to walking and biking because of the facilities we've put in, and transit as well. Transit for the downtown is still very successful.
So when you do the modeling, do you model demand by each mode of transportation and capacity?
We look at, yes, each mode, and we look at the screen lines, how they come through, and the downtown area is taken as a whole. So there is capacity there to continue to have accommodate vehicles. But again, it's the downtown, and we are growing with intensification. So as with every major city, successful major city, their downtowns will see other modes levels being increasing, and the car traffic is still there, but the travel times may be slower for vehicles.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'd just like to say congratulations to the ward councillor and the chair and the staff and the Elgin businesses who really, I think, work together on this project to bring it to something where everyone can buy into it. And I think that is, you all to be saluted for that, because, this is difficult. And I guess my one other question is, how realistic is it to get that construction, the primary part of it, done in one construction period? Because we've certainly seen on Main Street that's taken much longer than that. And I know businesses struggle through construction periods. So is this achievable, and what sort of guarantees are there that you're going to manage that?
Mr. Chair, excuse me, my voice is weak today, so Mr. Gontier will back me up if my voice fails completely on this. I want to compliment the staff in both the construction project management and asset management who've done a real deep dive into this issue. We have a couple of major pieces of infrastructure that need to be excavated and replaced, and that is the bulk of the heavy construction, the deep storm water, the deep sewer, and the local water mains. That work will be done quickly within the first year. As soon as we can get in and get the construction season. There'll actually be some advance work done in the year prior to it to deal with utility conflicts and those sorts of some hydro poles and the like that need to be moved to facilitate that construction. We'll go in, we'll do that heavy infrastructure, get the first layer laid down of asphalt after that's done so we can put the road back in operations, and we'll also have parking in operations. And then what we have at the second year is a moving construction project through the corridor, and that's where the more detailed detour planning that we're working on and the detailed construction staging strategy will work with the local businesses to sort of work on the timing. We can have some flexibility in our contracts with our contractor about when we do the second and third lifts of asphalt, and we know that those are really critical. If we can time them to lower seasons of the year, avoid hockey playoffs if the Sens are actually there, those sorts of things, those are things we can do and work with a contractor on this. My staff, obviously say this is an aggressive strategy, and I want to emphasize this, but we understand what the businesses are facing and we're going to do our very best to make it work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, Councillor Chernishenko.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling just a tiny bit like the orphan in this project, remembering that Hawthorne is in Capital Ward, which is part of this, but I can live with that. I've been at the center of the attention for enough major renewal projects for maybe a lifetime in the past 6 years, so that's okay. But I do want to remember that Hawthorne is part of this. And we have heard some concern, got some letters in the past few days, particularly around the sort of the conflict, the interaction zone, once you've passed under the Queensway, if you're coming from downtown, the section where you've got the interaction of quite a number of different types of vehicle movements, and you're getting on and off the Queensway and crossing Pretoria Bridge, as we've just heard, for example. That area that's between the Queensway and Queen Elizabeth Driveway as one side, and then on the other side, the actual crossing of Colonel By Drive on Hawthorne continue to be somewhat challenging because of all that interaction. Is there anything that you can highlight that is being done or might still be done to provide greater security and I suppose predictability in types of movements in those areas?
There is an additional infrastructure renewal project that we're currently scoping for renewing Greenfield as well as the north end of Main Street north of the Queensway. That project also includes looking at the intersection of Colonel By and Main Street as well as Colonel By and Hawthorne. It also includes looking at improving the cycling connections from Pretoria Bridge down Colonel By and onto Graham, which is the main cycling route through there. So through another project, those concerns are being met.
Mm-hmm. That's on the one side. I'd say the more concerning one is that area between the Queensway and Pretoria Bridge, when you passed under the Queensway on Elgin, where you've got cars coming from the Loblaws area, you've got cars wanting to exit to the right onto Queen Elizabeth Driveway or go straight on Pretoria. Is there anything in that interaction, at a minimum, clearer marking of demarcation of lanes and where crossing over should occur and should not? Any opportunity to create raised ramps for pedestrians, cycling, I suppose height removal from the main flow of vehicle traffic?
Although that section of Pretoria Bridge is out of scope for this particular project, we'll take that as direction to work with you to look at all of those elements and see what can be done in the future. But that section of Pretoria that you're speaking to is not on the immediate renewal list.
Okay. Okay. That is a very busy area, so any opportunity we have to do that, and I know there's an NCC jurisdiction in there that's quite important as well, so please do look at that. I guess I just want to confirm some numbers I think are quite important. The overall area parking numbers are extremely high, and you have in this report, but maybe you can remind us what that loss of about 30 on-street spots represents in the overall scheme of available parking in the area.
For the corridor, we're going from 122 down to 90.
Mm-hmm. That's on street, but it's something like 3,000 or more spaces, as I recall, is available. Yeah.
So I'll just assist here, and within one block of Elgin on either side, there's approximately 1,200 parking spaces, and within all of Centertown, there's almost 4,000 parking spaces.
I thought that was quite important to note, because I was quoted by one of the delegations here from my comments in the report, and really the point that I was trying to make is that too much expectation or attention has been given to the idea that there is a spot right in front of my business and that it is critical to the importance of my business. And we know from studies worldwide that that on-street spot right in front of my business is actually almost irrelevant to the success of the business. It's rarely available to your client that wanted to park right in front of your door anyway, but it's the overall picture that matters so much. And I think it's very important to note that there is plenty of available parking in the area, although that will represent a change for some people to understand they might look a little differently, but also there's an actual increase in available parking during rush hour, because right now there is no parking available during rush hour, and there will be permanent parking available during rush hour. How many spaces is that will always be available in rush hour that isn't now?
That would be the 90 spots.
Okay, so it's 90 will be permanently available that otherwise would have been removed during the rush hours. Thank you. I just want to highlight in summing up, I'm very supportive of this change. There were various alternatives, tweaks that could have been made, might still be made, but I recognize that there are many different users, many different needs here, and ultimately it was going to be a compromise for everyone. And I want to highlight that Main Street, which underwent a significant change, the initial anecdotal reports are that it's working better than it did before. I'm hearing from drivers that all it took was one turning vehicle to block an entire lane, and if one of those lanes was currently being used, if we were off-peak and parking was there, you would literally clog all traffic flow on Main Street, even though it was ostensibly a four-lane road. And now with the turning lanes that have been introduced, and as we are going to see here on Elgin, we're actually seeing better flow at all times of day than when this was a much wider, supposedly had more capacity. So I think that's something that we can anticipate here at Elgin that I think is really positive. We hear about placemaking and its importance. Councillor Deans referred to conferences she's been at and urbanism and how studies all over the world are showing that the importance to the success of streets is around having a street environment where people want to come, they want to linger, they want to tell their friends, hey, it's a great place to visit. And that's what I believe that this street is going to not reintroduce, because Elgin already has some of those attributes, but particularly highlight. So summing up, because the beeper's gone on me, I think this is an excellent series of compromises. I want to thank all of the different players. They were, many constituents as well as businesses and different interest groups that had expertise to offer, and especially to staff and the consultants who went through more meetings and more problem solving than is typical on a redesign like this. So thank you to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next is Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I want to ask staff a couple of questions, but I want to begin by, thanking everyone. I think it was when you get a situation where everyone's happy, but everyone would like to see a bit more, it's usually a comfortable position where OC's not super happy, cyclists aren't super happy, pedestrians aren't super happy, businesses aren't super happy. residents aren't super happy, and vice versa. Everyone's a bit happy. So I think it's a good compromise feeling to be in, and certainly I think Elgin plays an important role in connecting to important iconic elements of our city, but also obviously the connection to City Hall. I want to hear from you on the discussion relating to the hydro poles, because I think that's one where Main Street was unable to get the hydro pole buried. Rideau, there was a section where we were able to. I'm recently in the discussion, as we're redoing Montreal Road in a couple of years, around hydro pole. I'd like for the public record to hear about what is the impetus of putting the hydro poles underground.
Our preliminary estimate to bury the hydro poles is $10 million, and currently those funds are not available. Our City of Ottawa undergrounding policy speaks to having a third party pay for the undergrounding, and that's typically a developer or a business improvement association, and we have neither of those in this situation, so that's the situation that we're in today.
So $10 million, the estimated figure of including the full burial, I imagine, for this program. Have we segregated what the cost of the underground decking, just putting in the deck as part of the pouring of the sidewalk or the road, would be in part of those, as part of that estimate?
Chair, we did not break out that estimate. In addition to the $10 million, there would also be some hookups at the private businesses and residential buildings would have to fork out as well.
And I appreciate that. I think there's a lot of complexities around who pays for that, but I think there's an effort. We could at least set the groundwork, which is sending out that duct line. If we had, as part of the construction, if we were to establish the duct line, then individual property owners or businesses could connect, and then it creates that incentive. Because right now it's like, it's a bit of a who moves first kind of game, right? And it'd be interesting if we were to put in the ductwork initially and see, following that, if there are sections of street that would cover their costs. I know that speaking to some of the businesses, some have upgraded their hydro connections already. Others haven't, but maybe that's the impetus. And if you don't have it today, is it possible to get it before council of what the if we were to put the ductwork on the city's right of way, not establishing the connection, but at least the underground as part of this program?
I think Mr. Manconi's going to answer that question for you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, just some cautionary notes on that train of thought. I did speak to the CEO of Hydro Ottawa in that regard in terms of what the art of the possibility is. And while you may want to drop some duct banks while you're going down doing construction, that really doesn't give you a lot. What they need, and I just caution everybody on the $10 million, that's a ballpark estimate. They would need to go to detailed design to even go down the road that you're talking about in terms of what that will give anybody and then the complexity of all the individual connections and so forth. So the cost will just keep mounting is what I wanted to say and share with you, that I'm not sure we want to go down that path because it really won't give you much other than a bunch of empty duct banks for 50, 60 years down the road when you reopen the street up. So I doubt you're going to want to come back in 5 years and open up the street and so forth. So when I spoke to Hydro Ottawa, the CEO, he did want me to emphasize, be very careful about going down a certain path of what is possible and not possible. It's old infrastructure, and you need to do a detailed design to give you a meaningful answer to your question. So we don't have that, and we'd have to pay Hydro Ottawa to go down that road, and we don't have the funds for that, so we need direction and funding from council.
No, I recognize it's a question of dollars. It's just, we just had the report, and we approved the report on Complete Streets, the follow-up, and I think we've seen a shift in and around city departments, around understanding complete streets, the relationship to complete streets. But if there's one group that doesn't understand complete streets, this is no offense to Hydro because they're a standalone organization, but that pole on the sidewalk becomes 60 centimeters of issues to pedestrian and to businesses for patios and so on. So yeah, I think, that 60 meters is becoming more and more precious. So to me, it's a missed opportunity because we're not touching this street. We have in the report it says it's the old. I thought it was Rideau, but I guess Rideau's redone. So Rideau can't be the oldest pipes. It's now Elgin that's the oldest pipes in the city. So we're not doing these pipes in a long time. I think there's an opportunity here to at least explore. I recognize there's a cost element. I just think that Hydro doesn't get the picture of complete streets and the sidewalk space and so on. They just view electricity to business or to user. And in my mind, they might be a partner in this. They might see the value over time because, it's the who moves first kind of portion. So it'd be nice for us to have at least a figure of what establishing the ductwork, no connection, ahead of council.
So thank you for that, Councillor. I think Mr. Manconi has made it clear they can't do that for you. It would take detailed design work to give you that number. And I think in terms of talking to Hydro about being a partner, I think that Mr. Manconi has already engaged them a number of times on this issue, and the answer has been it's going to cost you at least $10 million, and that's a conservative figure. I can point out that, and in the report it's indicated, staff is going to do everything they can to move those poles out of the right-of-way. So the poles are not going underground, but they will be moved as construction goes on to take them out of the main thoroughfare, to take them out of people's ways. So we're going to be doing everything we can within our mandate and within our dollars to deal with the poles. But the bearing of the actual poles is a much bigger discussion. It's also discussion with each of the individual businesses. I think the estimate that we heard to do connections would be something in the area of $50,000 per business that the businesses would have to take out of their pockets to make those new connections. So there's the city cost, but there's also the cost to the individual property owners as well that has to be taken into account.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chair, on this, I'll agree to disagree. I think that, we are the capital city. Elgin is a very important street in that regards. And, to me, what this, even if they standardize the pole 60 centimeters from the curb, which is, it's still in the right-of-way, that's basically a meter lost off the sidewalk. So and
I don't deny that, and if you can find a funding formula that will put $10 million or more on the table before council, I'm sure we'd all be happy to have that discussion.
It would be more than $10 million, because you're also probably going to have to repay everyone in Canada North who paid to have their wires buried through a special area levy.
Yeah,
so if you want to change policy, you have to realize what kind of policy you're changing, not to mention every other community that wants this done.
Fair comment.
No, it is a fair comment. Just keep in mind that don't twist my words. I'm not looking for the $10 million plan. I'm just looking, what is the cost of establishing the ductwork along the corridor? No connections to businesses, just the ductwork as part of the construction. I think practically that's a very easy thing. We're digging everywhere along the road. You establish a duct, as you reestablish your curb cut and your sidewalk edge, you put in the right ductwork. You don't do any cross cuts. Anyways, I'll go back on the list. I have further comment.
Well, I think that's fine. I'll put you back on the list. But again, I think staff made it clear it's not as simple as simply digging a hole. There'd have to be detailed design work done. And additionally, without any buy-in from Hydro or another funding source, it would mean coming back and reopening the road 5 or 10 years from now to take advantage of the work that you've done, which I think A, the businesses wouldn't be thrilled about, and B, I don't see that as something that would actually happen. Our priorities and our dollars would be moving to other projects and other streets in the city. But I will put you back on the list. Councillor Tierney.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And again, it's great to see so many motions and direction to staff that have come forward today. I think that's going to help some of the items. I still have a lot of questions, only seeing some of these motions today, but some that came to mind for staff, first of all, and I've mentioned this before, right now, if you go onto Elgin Street between 1:30 and 2 on a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, it's like a swarm of bees, people flooding out of bars. They're looking for cabs or Ubers. Right now, cabs and Ubers are using loading zones in the space that's available on the street. Have we looked at that and how we're going to accommodate that? Because right now, I'm looking at the design, and there's some great stuff north of Waverley. I see a lot of parking, and if you can convert that to flex, that might work. But Waverley to Gladstone, 2 blocks where you have Lieutenant's Pump and St. Louis, and you have a whole series of bars that are well occupied. There's only a combined 7 parking spots, and I don't even know if those are flexible spots. So maybe you could speak to that on how we'll address those issues.
Chair, there will, at early morning hours, as you were speaking, and we do have loading zones identified in the plan in this area where there are mostly restaurants, and there are taxi stands as well that will be there. The flex space can be used if it's just to pick up and drop off. It's very quick, and they move on through the corridor. So we feel that the taxis and Uber will be able to function on this road.
Great. And again, I think north of Waverley, I think if you're using flex spaces and you're saying these are going to be taxi stands during certain hours or loading zones, it could probably work. I'm pretty concerned at the existing diagram, unless it's been updated. There's only 7 spots available between Waverley and Gladstone. So I just want to, I'd like staff to come back before council with more of a plan on what we're going to tell people, because obviously you can't stop traffic in the road. There's still buses and cars using those 2 lanes, so they can't stop there. What are we going to do? Is it going to be working with the bars saying, walk north and stay on Elgin Street until you can get to a spot where there's cabs? Or is it going to be the way it is, where people are just going to flood the streets and grab whatever they can? So it's more of direction, if you can find a solution to that before council. Great.
I'd just like to hear from staff whether, in fact, they think it's a problem that needs a solution or it's already addressed.
Yep, no, please do.
I'd just like to add that we are adding 2 new loading zones, so there'll be 4 loading zones along the corridor, 2 of which would be in the location that you're talking about, near the park, just north of Gilmore. There's loading zones on both sides of the streets, as well as a taxi zone there, and also Waverley, the section of Waverley that we're touching just west of Elgin into the park. There are 6 additional on-street parking spaces or flex spaces there as well. So taxis and Uber and other pickups and drop-offs can use these loading zones, these taxi zones, as well as the flex spaces if they're available.
Yeah, I only see 7 in these 2-block area, but I'll go back with staff before council and have a look at this a little deeper. Councillor Moffat's moving a motion that I think is very critical, the comprehensive traffic plan. I just want to know how we're going to be able to add our feedback to this. When would this come to us to make sure that we can provide our feedback as councillors representing many different areas of the city? We know how traffic flows. We're not traffic experts by any means, but there's some examples of whether it's car or bicycle that hopefully we can find to fix things. This could be a good opportunity. A couple of quick examples, removing some of the east-west barriers on streets like Gloucester, or looking at, even right here on Laurier, when you pull into the parking garage, I know it's just off of Elgin, but there's a lot of traffic and congestion, fights between pedestrians, cyclists, trying to get into this parking garage, and it backs up traffic. So are these the kind of things that will be looked at with a comprehensive traffic plan, and if so, will this come back to committee or council for us to add our 2 cents?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Manconi to speak to that. We As a rule, we do not bring back traffic plans. We direct the traffic plans are done. We don't bring them back for consideration and debate because, as you rightly pointed out, we are not traffic engineers or traffic planners. Staff has direction. They will go off and do it, and Mr. Manconi will speak about that a little bit more. But you're quite right. As part of Councillor Moffat's motion, there is indication that staff will consult with councillors in formulating the plan. So I'm going to let Mr. Manconi speak to that piece.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, what I can offer is I like to hear your ideas. So what I'm going to propose is that if you want to input into it or you want to hear the thought process on it, you just send me or Phil Landry a note, and we'll sit down with you and your team and we'll brainstorm your suggestions and build that in. We're not going to bring the plan back, but we want your input into it, and obviously we're going to engage the community too. So happy to work with you in your office on ideas and suggestions.
Okay, great. So there is the opportunity for councillors to add their feedback to it, which is great, but will that be circulated to all council as we proceed with any kind of changes, or if we do have suggestions and we've decided to make changes, is this going to be on the fly? We're going to be making the changes, or is this going to be one big plan? It'll be combined of all the consultation with councillors, and then it will be presented, or sorry, executed by your staff.
It'll be executed as you've noted, but I think the flavor that you want put on it, I'm happy to do that, is that it's nothing's forever, right? It can evolve. If we've forgotten something, we can add to it, and we all know Mr. Landry, how he works. He's very open to suggestions and stuff, and Ms. Chi and her team also, so we'll make it dynamic, and if there's things we've missed or we want to add, we'll do that.
That's great. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. The current budget says, I believe, $34.5 million for that segment of Elgin Street. How much of that is the sewage component?
Mr. Chair, we don't have that number right handy, but we'll have that information for you. We'll circulate it as a follow-up to committee.
Okay, because we're taking wooden sewers out, and I'm looking for reassurances that in the budgeting process, first of all, is this on the standard tax form? Because my understanding is if it was below the road, that'd be on the other line item, water and sewer, versus our standard tax base. Maybe you can help me understand that. Would that be correct?
Yeah, Chair. Anything that's dealing with water and sewer is charged to the rate. The road reinstatement component, the landscaping, and the sidewalks are part of the tax component. But we'll get you the breakdown between the two.
Okay, if you can get me the breakdown of the sewage component. And I'm hoping we've been very conservative in our budgeting because wooden sewers, in my mind, mean contamination. And I assume if we take out wooden sewers, would we be bound by the province to ensure that we clean that land before we put the sewage lines back in?
So, Chair, just clarifying, did you mention wooden sewers?
Yeah, that's my understanding, that we have some wooden infrastructure underground. At least that's what I've heard.
No, that's...
Maybe the chair can clarify his statement on that. I'm not sure.
So I can confirm there's no wooden water or sewer infrastructure.
Okay,
so
great. So forget the wood for a second. Let's say we have some leaky pipes. Now that we know that there's no wooden sewers, would we still be bound on the cleanup component of it? Because they're, what, 100 and somewhat years old, my understanding?
Yeah, a lot of the infrastructure that's in place is over 100 years old. But basically, we're replacing all of the infrastructure. If there's any contaminated material in the corridor, we also have protocols that we need to adhere to in terms of how we manage that soil.
Okay. And if you can get me the budgeting element, I just want to make sure it's conservative in there to make sure, because I know how these projects go. They find contamination. The costs spool up very quickly, and I just want to make sure it's budgeted correctly. When it comes to Main Street and Bank Street reconstruction, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of great stuff that's happened. But when you look at Bank Street, what was the original timeline for that? Did we have creep on that? Did it go much further than what it was supposed to?
Chair, the timelines that we had for Bank Street are very comparable to what we're proposing for Elgin, and we achieved the timelines for Bank. We had Bank fully closed for 1 year, and at the end of the 1 year, we had the road reopened to base asphalt. In the second year, we came with rotation lane impacts to basically finish the landscaping and the sidewalks.
Great. Thank you for that, Emily. There was mention that some of the poles will have to be moved, some of the hydro poles, in 2018. Is that correct? Did I hear that, or was I imagining that one?
Correct. That in the fall of 2018, we're going to go in and start moving the poles to get them out of the areas that they're at right now in terms of conflict points, so that we can clear the corridor for the full underground reconstruction to take place in 2019.
So when those poles are, we put new poles in. The current ones out there are old and wood, and they have like staples all over them. They look like hell. In the new world, are there going to be is there a certain kind of pole that's going to go in that's going to prevent, graffiti and staples going into these poles to keep it clean? If we're going to make the investment in these poles, I want to make sure the street looks good.
So, Chair, that's something that we'll be working with Hydro in terms of the pole materials that they'll be reinstalling along Elgin.
Great. And last quick two questions, Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you. I noticed Jack Purcell Park was mentioned in there as a possible area for some parking and other things. Is the actual Jack Purcell Badminton Park, or whatever you want to call it, is that going to be affected at all, or is it just the driveway that goes into it?
There's no impact on that park.
That's great. And last question, I noted in the report, it spoke to ADOA, and I think we all live with the ADOA and a lot of the regulations that the province requires us as a corporation of the province to uphold. I noticed there was 4 items, if you were to look at it just purely through the ADOA lens, not through our city policy lens, through the ADOA lens. 3 could be fixed quite quickly. But then there was one about our own parking meter that is creating a challenge on the street. I'm just curious, are we going to fix that parking meter quickly? Like, I think if we've identified it, we can't just leave it there. We should move it or do something about it to, not have that congestion.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest we take that issue specifically back, and we'll look at that issue before council, and if it's a matter that can be done with in the advanced works. My suspicion is that we have to move it out of the way for the heavy construction. But if there's something we can do during the advanced works, we'll try to figure that out, and we'll get it.
No, I'd appreciate it. I think if we know about where we're creating accessibility issues with our own equipment, that could be, I think a wrench could move those things. We probably should do it. Anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Caudry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And first, starting off, I just want to say thank you to your office, Mr. Chair, as well as city staff in terms of working this through in a proper fashion. And by proper fashion, I mean that you've done all of the consultations, including the Accessibility Advisory Committee here at the city. And I'm very thankful for that conversation. And some of the changes or the adjustments that were made to the plan going forward were due to the recommendations of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, so I want to thank you for that. In terms of a couple of questions from that accessibility point of view, the patios that are currently existing and going forward into 2018 or 2019, and I heard Councillor McKinney's motion. How is that going to affect the operation during construction when the construction is starting to begin in terms of the accessibility on that street?
Chair, as part of our traffic management plan for construction for the detours, we will need to look at accessibility, ensuring that there are detours for cyclists and pedestrians as well.
And that would also apply to the parking on the street, because there will be no parking, I'm assuming, during construction. So how are we going to handle the accessible parking? Are we going to move that, as one of the members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee suggested, to move it on to other side streets close by? Is that the thoughts that we're going forward?
Those are things that we would have to look at, yes, in the accessibility parking. So we have to work with the needs of our commuting public, and those are the items that would be examined during the development of the traffic management plan.
Okay, so during the management plan, I guess you're going to come back to the AAC in order to consult on that, or is that something
we
that
could, yes.
We could at least comment on it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In terms of, I'm looking at this and I've seen other complete street designs, like Main Street and others that have been completed like Bank Street. Snow storage. for winter, our winters. How are we going to handle that in this particular street with the parking on the side, expanded sidewalks, not narrow roads, but less lanes on traffic? How are we going to handle that?
Chair, Mr. Wiley will respond.
Chair, typically in these situations, it requires extra removal to affect travel portion of the lanes.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. Currently, the snow removal on Elgin Street is exactly that usually a day or day and a half after the snow is removed. With this new format going in terms of, cutting one lane of traffic, does that mean that you're going to be plowing and removing snow at the same time, or will there still be a delay of a day or two?
No, Chair, we'll adjust accordingly.
Sorry, I didn't catch the part.
Chair, we'll adjust accordingly.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's all, Councillor? Yeah. Councillor DeRouche?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question to staff. Reports state that Elgin is a truck route. Are you going to reroute, and where the truck's going to be, which road they're going to be using?
That's correct, Councillor. Elgin Street is an existing truck route, and our recommended design accommodates heavy vehicles through the corridor, and there's no plan to reroute the trucks through this corridor.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fleury, you wanted back on?
Yes, and the chair was worried about my comments, but I just wanted to wrap up on the matter. I think, again, Elgin Street is a very important street. It is not in my area, but as the councillor is well aware, just like the Byward Market, there's areas of town sometimes where we're all interested because we all see how it contributes to our city, but also to the capital city features that we much desire. I wanted to first and foremost thank staff, and one of the features that is here is that the consultations for this process went very well. They were well attended. There was great capture of the feedback from the various stakeholders. So for that, I think it's a great kudos to the consultants, to city staff, and also to those who have participated. I saw the big crowds. We got the feedback. Tweaks were made following those recommendations and those ideas, and we are where we are today. I think it is, although there will continue to be pieces that we all would love to individually see added or changed, I think it is a very strong plan, and we're supporting our downtown streets by promoting a project like Elgin. Alors j'aimerais simplement remercier toute l'équipe, puis j'aimerais aussi remercier le président du comité ainsi que la conseillère du quartier. Je pense qu'ils ont fait un superbe travail d'informer les collègues et puis de continuer la conversation avec les différents intervenants dans la communauté. Merci.
Thank you very much. I believe that's all the... Councillor Kakish?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff and all the stakeholders that are here and everyone that's worked on this file for the last, it's been a year and a bit now. I usually drive into work, and I drive in about 22 kilometers from Riverside South, but I also, when I'm downtown, I'm a pedestrian, and I walk everywhere when I'm downtown, and I've seen those pinch points firsthand on Elgin Street, so I think what we're doing here is really, we have a unique opportunity with ripping up the street and making sure that that cross-section is much nicer than it is, and I'm glad that, some of the business people that are here, including Mr. Karm's, come a long way, I think, from where he was a few weeks ago, and I think we have a unique opportunity to beautify Elgin Street and make it much nicer than it is now, make it more friendly for pedestrians, cyclists, and people in wheelchairs, and improve the accessibility of that street. It might be a bit more of a pain for us suburban people when we're driving down, but we have other alternatives still, and I think maybe you spoke to some of those other north-south routes that we'd be able to access. So fully in support of what we have before us here, and I think it's a unique opportunity that we get every now and then to really improve the infrastructure and the cross-section of some of these roads when we have the opportunity to renew the infrastructure underground. I just had a couple of questions, and the first one, Councillor Deans touched on a bit, and I know, Mr. Willis, you gave a good response, but you also said it's an aggressive timeline to be working with. So I just want to make sure we're not over-promising and under-delivering or putting ourselves in that situation. I know just several weeks ago this was a 2-year construction season project, and it's something that the business people wanted. I fully support and understand the importance of getting it done in 12 months for the local businesses and all the regular users of that road. But are we, what are the actual implications of that? Is there still going to be a lot of, for example, landscaping and soft infrastructure that's going to be happening after the main work that you spoke to? And are you confident, you're saying it's aggressive timeline, are you confident that we'd be able to get it done within the 12 months that we're committing to?
If I can jump in for a second, just, and then I'll have Mr. Willis, but no, we have had those discussions, and the businesses are aware that year 2 year 1 we'll put down a temporary sidewalk of asphalt probably to get through the winter, and then year 2 will come in and we'll put in the full sidewalk. The curbs will be up in year 1 though. So I'll let Mr. Willis, but in terms of whether it's aggressive or not, we're going to be following the same model we used on Bank Street, which we were able to do within a year.
So it would be done for motorists but not for pedestrians? Is that when you say sidewalk in season 2?
No, that's not correct, Mr. Chair. During the first year of construction, we will rip up the old asphalt, but we'll put a temporary asphalt layer to maintain a sidewalk throughout the entire construction period. Excuse me. And we'll do all the heavy construction, and in year 2, after the lanes are back open on the roads and the parking is available, we'll work block by block, rip out the temporary asphalt, and put the permanent sidewalk surface down at that point in time, so we keep the continuity of access through the street open throughout the time period. And when I refer to an aggressive schedule, it is, but we have experience doing this, and I guess it's reasonable for me to say that, we have to be prepared for the things that do upset construction projects, like inclement weather and, shortened construction season because delayed frost getting out of the ground. I think the businesses appreciate that that's, we're going to do absolutely our best efforts, and those are things that are beyond our control. But things that are within our control, we will push this project along because we want to get that portion complete and have the road effectively operating while we finish the more detailed elements off.
My second question is with regards to the speed limit, and I see a reference in there about 30 kilometers, and I don't want to, it's not a popular thing to say, but I think that's a little overkill. And so how realistic is that in terms of bringing it down to 30? I mean, are we realistically, from a traffic perspective, is anybody actually going to be going 30 on that road? And is that a little too restrictive in terms of what the new speed limits are? And I'm not sure what is it 40 or 50 now on Elgin?
Chair, it's 50 now, and for the traffic to operate at the posted speed of 30, it has to be designed that way, and this street is designed for a slower speed. Even with the sidewalks, the animation on the street, it's a very calming effect on the street with those features already. But on top of that, we have several raised intersections, so that'll help calm the traffic as well. So we will achieve the 30K on the street.
And I appreciate that the cross-section will be different, and so drivers will automatically be in that sort of comfort zone where they're not going to be going 50 or whatever they're going today. But is 30 a lot, though? Is 40 not a more reason, from a traffic perspective? I don't know if Phil Landry can comment on that. Is 40 a more reasonable speed limit to put instead of 30? I'm sure Phil was hoping to leave without coming up today, but...
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think in this case, where the road's being designed, there's physical features that are being put in place to reduce those speeds, as well as the interaction that you're going to see in the future in terms of the pedestrians that are going to be traveling along the road, the parking, the width of the road. It's all going to lead to a speed that it won't feel comfortable driving more than 30 or 35 kilometers an hour And the majority of the people are going to be driving at those speeds because the majority of people drive at what feel comfortable. If you were to drive down the road today, where you've got the 4 lanes, driving 30 is probably not comfortable, so that's why people don't drive at that speed. But as you build the infrastructure to support those speeds, then you'll see that occur.
But in some of the roads that were shown where we've done this in previous years, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think we brought them down to 30 though, did we?
Not the other streets that were.
Okay, so this is something that's being driven, I assume, from the local councillor or from the community. How did we get 30 in the report?
Because the corridor is so tight, we could not fit in the cycling facilities. So for the corridor to be a safe corridor for cyclists to ride in mixed traffic or share the lane, the street has to operate at 30K.
Mm-hmm. But for example, in Westboro or Wellington, Richmond, when we did that, and some of the Preston, we did not bring those to 30.
No, we did not, but there are alternative routes as well for those, for Wellington. We have Sharrows, there are bus stops on Wellington, so those other features slow down the traffic as well in those sections of Wellington.
Okay. That's my only reluctance, Mr. Chair, and I know you've been working long and hard on this file for the past 3 more weeks, so I won't give you more hard time here today, but I am a bit reluctant about how realistic that 30 is. I guess, it's to be seen and to be determined, but if this is what the working group has sort of settled on and supports, I think, we'll accept that today. I'm not sure how realistic it is for us to expect drivers to be going down 30, but I think with the different cross-section that's coming into play, obviously, it might be outside their comfort zone as a driver to be going at 40 or 50 or whatever they're driving today. So, but I was a bit skeptical about that number. But anyways, if that's the working group's decision, I respect the work that they've done over the past year to arrive at it. So I'll leave it at that. And thanks again to
Appreciate
staff
that.
and delegations.
Thank you very much.
And
I
stakeholders.
think that's everybody but Councillor McKinney. So, Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to everyone here today, especially to staff who I know have worked tirelessly on this. I know many of you, I've seen you hide from me in the community on a few occasions, I think not wanting to bring up Elgin Street. But it's been a process that has even surprised me. I'll be honest. The interest in Elgin Street and what you had to do to get where we are today has been both intense and impressive. We had a working group where we had residents, we had the Centertown Citizens Community Association on it, who have worked very hard. Obviously, the Elgin Business Association worked very hard with them. I want to thank all of you for the input and where we've got to today. People love Elgin Street. There's no doubt. People across the city love Elgin Street, and I think it's a testament to what's happened over the course of the last year or so as we get to where we are today. We had an online survey where we had over 1,000 responses back. We had open houses where we had, a couple hundred people show up at each one of them. And the reason that people love Elgin Street is because of the businesses that are on it. There's, people like to come out to the businesses. Elgin Street is one of those traditional main streets where many people in the city have grown up on Elgin Street, have been coming to Elgin Street for a lot of their life, have either owned businesses or have visited Elgin Street. But at the same time, this is, when we look at how we reapportion public space in the city, we have to think about everyone. And this street is also the highest density traditional main street in the city of Ottawa. And it is also situated right in the middle of one of the densest residential neighborhoods in the city. There's a school on it. There are 2 parks. There are very important businesses. There are 3 churches, transit, all on Elgin Street. So, we also have over 70% of residents who live and work in the downtown walk to work. So all of these, when we talk about Elgin and the different users and what it means to reconstruct this street, we have to think about the public good. And we have to have that conversation about what is really in the public good. And obviously, we can't continue to build cities the way we had in the past. But what is the way forward? And I do believe that today is a win for business. I do. I think that when we have the wider sidewalks, when we have that flex space and the businesses are able to decide how that evolves through, whether they use it for patio space, how they use their space for patio space, and there just will be more space for them. Today's recommendations, if accepted by committee and council, are a win for pedestrians. Today on Elgin Street, you saw the pictures, pedestrians have got the lowest level of service. They've got a D. And this will give pedestrians an A. And it's what we need to do. We need to make sure that pedestrians, they are the most vulnerable users on the road. We have a school on this road on Elgin Street. Kids cross the street. We have many vulnerable users who use Elgin Street. And this is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to give pedestrians the highest level of service on Elgin Street. The 30 kilometers an hour, I'd just like to talk about that for a sec. It is different. It is something that, we haven't done before. But what it does is as the manager pointed out, as Ms. Chi pointed out, it provides cyclists with a higher level of service. There's no, staff have not recommended cycling lanes, but with 30 kilometers an hour, we know that a pedestrian or a cyclist hit at 30 kilometers an hour, the chances of fatality are something like 8 to 10%. That takes a very significant upturn at 40 kilometers. At 50, it's 90%. So it's, we do have, I believe, an ethical obligation to design out of our roadways catastrophic injury and death. And I think that this recommendation will move us there. So I thank everybody for the work on this. The construction in 1 year is something that I very strongly support. I always have. Again, I go back to this is a very popular spot for residents, for visitors, and for the businesses to survive the construction period. To have that done in 1 year is something that we're committed to. We're committed to working with you on, and to make sure that that the effects are mitigated to the best that we can. So I thank everyone for considering the recommendations put forward by staff, and ask obviously for your support.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe that this has been one of the most challenging files that this committee has had to deal with this term. I can say personally as chair, it's been a challenging file. There are a lot of different stakeholders. We have business owners, we have residents, we have kids going to school and the parent council, we have commuters, we have pedestrians and cyclists and drivers and transit and everything all on the street. And the overlay to that is once we start this construction, there are concerns and issues that arise from the AODA. the city's design guidelines, the city's complete streets policy, our brand new patio bylaw, which we just passed a few months ago, and they create a whole layer of issues and concerns and questions that the report had to deal with as well. And this project is very much about change. Elgin is one of the oldest streets in the city. It has not been refurbished or rehabbed in a very long time. And so this report is about both managing and facilitating that change. There's no question we need to open Elgin up. We need to address the infrastructure challenges. You know, the infrastructure is 100, 125 years old in some cases. So we simply don't have that opportunity not to do it. But the opening up the street, to my mind, also opens up opportunity. It opens up opportunity to fix Elgin Street. I think the kindest word I can use right now for pedestrians and those that are have mobility challenges is the street is unwieldy, and I think that's being kind. It is a real challenge for pedestrians. It scores a D on the scale of usability and safety. And to leave it that way, or to put it back the way it currently is, to me as a ward councillor, to me as the chair, it's simply unacceptable. The design being proposed very much addresses those pedestrian issues and opens up opportunities, I think, for businesses and residents alike. As I quoted earlier this morning, one of the businesses interviewed on CTV last night said it was a home run. We heard from Peter Abraham, who said he was very excited about the design. We heard from Mr. Karam, who represents the bulk of the businesses, the majority of the businesses on the street, and has done yeoman's work in reaching out to them and having those discussions, that he is also supportive of it. If we don't embrace it now, we'll lose this opportunity. We're not going back to this street for 40 or 50 years, and if we don't fix it now, we're not fixing it for a generation. So I don't think we have a choice. We have to embrace this opportunity, we have to make these changes, and we have to do it with a citywide view for all the users, and there are very many different types of users. To not do so again, I think, is completely unacceptable for this committee and for council, just to ignore the opportunity that we have there. So I think the proposal before you, I think staff did great work. I think John Manconi's team, Steve Willis's team, Vivi and Colin and our consultants, Alain Gontier, everybody really, I think John Manconi used the term, did a really deep dive, and they did, and put a lot of hard work. And they came up with, I thought, a reasonable plan, but we've made it better. We've made it better if we pass the motions today, if staff accepts the directions given. We've made it better, and we've made it better through working with the working group, hearing from the businesses, hearing from the residents, hearing from the different users, and also hearing from the outlying councillors who represent areas where people use that street to commute every day. So we've put all that into the pot, we boiled it all up together, and I think, again, if we adopt the motions in front of us today and we modify the report as those motions direct us, or will direct staff to do, and the direction has already been accepted that Councillor McKinney brought forward, I think that we are going to have a very positive change in our downtown core. But as Councillor McKinney said, Elgin is a street everybody loves. You love it if you're in Canada, you love it if you're in Vanier, you love it everywhere. It's a street that everybody uses. They come down there, they shop there, they eat there, they enjoy there, and we want to make that a better experience. We want to make that a better experience for everyone. So as I often say at this committee, it's all about balance. And again, I want to thank everybody who contributed to the compromise that we have before us today, and realize that not everybody was going to get everything, but everybody could get something. And I think this proposal does that. Everybody walks away from the table, regardless of how you use the street, whether you live there, whether you do business there, whether you travel there, you're all getting something out of this new design. And I would encourage each and every one of you to support the various motions and the overall recommendations of the report. So we'll move to the vote. And we'll start with the motions. The direction, as I say, has already been accepted. So Councillor Manette's motion on the City Hall parking during the construction phase, carried. We'll now move to Councillor Fleury's motion regarding flex space, carried. And Councillor McKinney's motion on the patio bylaw exemption for 2018. Carried. And finally, the traffic plan motion brought by Councillor Moffat, really on behalf of a number of different councillors from the outlying wards. Carried. And on the proposal as amended? Carried. Thank you. So going back to the main agenda, are there any inquiries? So under other business, there's something that needs to be dealt with today. We have to walk this on because of timing constraints. And so
I dissented on number 2 for the speed.
Okay, we'll pick up that dissent. Okay. So there's a matter that we have to add onto the list, and ask people to stay if they can stay, because it's a very important matter and it's very time sensitive. So there is someone who has been with this committee for quite some time who is going to be leaving us, and that's Rosie, our clerk. Rosie is going to be retiring, and this is her last meeting with us. Holy. So we have a little something for Rosie, and frankly, everybody in the room. I owe a big debt of gratitude to Rosie. When I was approached to take over as Chair of Transportation last term, I was a little concerned about the challenge of it, and our Deputy Clerk at the time, Leslie Donnelly, said, "Don't you worry, Rosie will take care of you." And Rosie has. And Rosie's trained me up. 2 cakes. So anything that I do well as a chair of this committee, I have to thank Rosie for that. And I know
Mr. Chair, this should be in the minutes, recorded in the minutes.
I think the clerk's busy right now. And I know I'm breaking protocol, Rosie, because I didn't tell you I was adding something to the agenda, but I apologize for that. And we have 2 cakes, yes. One is vanilla, one is chocolate, because we didn't know what Rosie liked best. So we're going to ask Rosie to come down and do the initial cut of the cake. And yes, and we're adjourned, but everybody in the audience is welcome to a piece of cake. Thank you very much, Rosie.
How many years? How many years? Congratulations. Holy. That would be perfect.